Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's Specify and Practice Group call. With that, I want to hand it over to Lewis and David to introduce today's topic in more detail, as well as guest presenter Barry Johnson, and get going with today's presentation. So, Lewis and David, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Hey, Lewis, you still have the control panel up on your screen that you're sharing, so you may want to move that or minimize it so everybody can see the full.
There we go. How's that?
Much better, much better. So anyhow, today was a topic that Lewis has been pressing me to try to present for months, and so it's a topic near and dear to his heart. So he's taking the lead on today's presentation, and he invited a guest presenter, and I will turn this over to Lewis, and Lewis, you can do the introduction.
Okay, today we're going to talk about the ICC, the International Code Council, the folks who write the model codes, the International Building Code, the International Energy Conservation Code, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and other dozens of codes that they produce, have a subdivision called the Evaluation Services, ICC-ES, and part of that is that they publish evaluation reports and have evaluation listings. And so this session today is to kind of introduce what they do, and then we will try to focus in on a couple of actual reports to show what to look for and what to be careful about so that you can get the right thing. The whole point behind the reports is to make it easier for design professionals to comply with the code. And speaking with us today is one of the professional engineers on the ICC ES staff, someone who actually takes the information provided by manufacturers, looks at the acceptance criteria, which we will discuss, he will discuss, and decides whether or not there's enough information to justify stating that the materials, the products, do or do not meet the IBC. And of course there are different versions of the IBC, and so it can get a little on the complicated side, but we're very pleased to have Barry Johnson, who operates out of Birmingham, Alabama, to be speaking with us, and he's going to do a series of slides. Barry?
Yeah, thank you, Lewis. Yeah, it didn't take long to tell I'm from Alabama since I opened my mouth up, but it's my accent kind of gives me away. But definitely it's really good to be here, and I appreciate the invitation to be able to speak to you today, and look forward to know any questions you may have during the presentation. Look forward to addressing that as well. But yeah, if we go ahead and start with the next slide, just to kind of get into the presentation. Really, when we get into, say, for example, in the building code or the residential code, there's various restrictive requirements and design requirements that we have to look at as far as the design of the building and construction of the building. And each one of those components needs to has certain code requirements. And whether it be say maximum spacing of studs, or minimum thickness of wood structural panels, or certain insulation requirements, or say surface burning requirements, different things like that. We have to go with particular code requirements. And it might end up being, say, wind loading we have to be concerned about, or a certain fire resistance rating we have to be concerned about. So it's just several things within the code that has to be taken into account, and each one of the components, we would have to look at those and determine what building code requirements would apply to those. Next slide, please, Luke. And there's a huge range of products, too. If any of you has been on our database to look at the different products, it can And also within the building code, you have just in general in the building code, you might have some traditional products that's been around thousands of years, as far as wood and masonry products and everything that just stood the test of time, and a lot of innovation, specific standards on those products. But you also just nature of construction. People are always wanting to do it. Maybe find a way to do it a little less expensive or a little quicker, or maybe a little stronger. And so there's always going to be some innovative products coming out, and they want the innovative products. If you're familiar with the code development process, the codes only come out every 3 years, and it might take several iterations of the code before that product will make it in the code. Just to be able to, like I said earlier, just that test of time and people getting more familiar with it to make it into the code. Next slide, please, Luke. An example of just a basic product, clay roof tile. The code gives some prescriptive requirements as far as the roofing requirements in Chapter 15. And just for the clay roof tile itself, there's been a specific standard for that product for a while, the ASTM-C 1167. Next slide, please. And, with all these new innovative products, the codes are large enough as it is. I think the building code in itself is probably 800 pages long now, and the residential code as well. So just between those two, talking well over 1,000 pages just between those two codes. And that's not counting plumbing codes and mechanical codes and everything else. So just think we had to include every product within the code. It would just be volumes and volumes that we'd have to be concerned with. It's hard enough as it is to keep up with what's in there. And but yeah, so this is a way that, like I said, a product can come to market a little quicker, also be a little more efficient. Next slide, please. And like I said earlier, even though they're coming to the marketplace, it might be 3 years down the road before they can get in the next code, or even 6 years, just depending on that product and just how receptive it is. And so, like I said, the evaluation reports give a way to do that. And what we want to do is just kind of look at the way we approve those products, and just see how they make it as far as make the life of the building official a little easier. So we just want to take a look at that from here on. Next slide, please. Okay, first of all, within the building code, we have an alternate materials and methods section in the code. And like I mentioned earlier, we have several historical products like masonry and wood and basic insulation products and other just gypsum board and other products that are just have already very receptive to the marketplace, and people are real familiar with them, and they have their own particular standards that people are familiar with. What happens here is, say, again, we're talking about that innovative product that comes in, and somebody wants to be able to show they meet the code. Well, this section gives that where it doesn't have to be specifically mentioned in the code, but it allows these products to be able to be approved by the building official. Next slide, please. And the way they're approved is one way that shows in 104.11.1 of the building code is through approved reports. And the way these reports are approved is through, first of all, the building official has the final approval. So it has to be, I guess, our organization, they're real familiar with it. So it gives them a comfort zone as far as being able to approve a product that has a report. And in preparing these reports, we'll go through and look at supporting data and then also the data has to come through approved sources, and we'll look at that a little bit later too. Next slide, please. And again, the building officials got the final approval for these, and a lot of times too, we're going to go to the next slide.
We might just observe, Barry, that if we're trying to use a new material that's not specifically coded or covered in the present building code, and we want to get it, and we've based our design on it, and we've got a set of sealed drawings issued for permit, and we put it on the plan examiner's desk, and he says, man, I never heard of that before. I don't know. I'm going to have to give that a thought. That individual plan examiners don't always operate exactly the same, and so what we need is something that's more universal that would be accepted by the building code officials, so that they don't have to do a lot of in-depth research themselves, and the designers and owners of facilities are not subject to a whim or just somebody not wanting to spend the time to investigate new materials.
Oh, exactly. That's a very good point. And one thing to keep in mind too, we think a lot of times about building departments, say for example in the case of Nashville or other larger building departments, for example, New York City and Miami, Dade County and Los Angeles, they even within their building departments have product approval people. But the vast majority of building departments are probably going to be smaller departments, talking 2 or 3 people having to go through and do all inspections, and they might do plan reviews part of the day and inspections, or the ones that just do inspections, they might have 25 inspections. And now they're real stretched very thin in a lot of cases, and so this, along with giving a consistent means of approval, it also gives an efficient way as well, because after inspector, if he's scheduled to do 25 or 30 inspections for the day, he doesn't really have time to go through binders of data and information and stuff. So this gives makes their life a little easier as well.
Hey, Louis, we have a couple of questions from our practice group members here. I think we ought to pass these along to Barry. So, Barry, this question comes from Tommy Smith. He's asking, how often do building officials reject products with evaluation service approval?
Not much. It does happen. They're right. Like I said, they're the final gatekeeper, so they might look at the report and not feel comfortable with it. It might be something locally that they've experienced, or just some other, maybe something that was controversial and having the acceptance criteria passed they don't feel comfortable with. But it doesn't happen very much, but it could happen, but it's very, very rare. It does happen.
Okay, we have a corollary from Jerry Pozo, who's asking, how can an architect disqualify a product which does have an ES report and conforms to the ASTM standards?
When you say disqualify, are we talking about reading a submittal for a substitution or a couple product?
I suspect that's what Jerry's asking. So what do you think, Louis? Or Barry, do you have an opinion? This takes it out of your realm a bit.
Yeah, is it more like disqualifying based on he just doesn't like the product? Is that kind of what they would be talking about?
Well, I suspect Jerry's asking, here's the second explanation from him. Yes, in lieu of a field mixed product over a pre-mixed product, perhaps. I'm thinking that could be mortar, for instance.
We think a lot alike. Well, I think it's, all of us, a lot of the decisions that we make in specifying are based on a certain level of confidence that may or may not have non-rational components to that. In general, I think most architects, if presented with real information that's reliable technical data, would accept a comparable product unless it's something they've never heard of, or there's always the possibility that they've had a bad experience with the manufacturer. I remember some years ago I had a very bad experience with one of the three major manufacturers of architectural glass in the country, and I wrote them out of my specs for several years until I finally got the confidence again to let them back in my spec because of some quality issues. So.
Okay, well, and that goes beyond the evaluation service report.
It goes beyond the evaluation
That's
service.
more experience. Okay.
Right.
Barry, we've interrupted you.
Oh, no, that's an excellent answer.
So
I catch my breath.
this new foam installation, and how do we get that?
Yeah, okay. Let's say you definitely a generic name here.
Oops. Sorry.
All right, that's good. That's good. You go ahead and go to that one. But yeah, just basically say we have a manufacturer who comes out, and in this case, for example, the Acme company decides to come out with a new spray foam insulation product, and with an enhanced fire rating. So how would they get that to market? They have a lot of claims in their advertisement. About enhancing air quality, being energy efficient and economical. How can we know that for sure? And so what happens is, in this case here, he might have the product and be excited about it, just go straight to market with it. And first construction job there, he has to submit his information to the building department. And so he gets there, and so he submits all the data. And you go ahead and go to the next slide, Lewis.
Okay.
But we got the case goes to the building official, and he says, he might not have time to look at it, or he looks at the data and it just doesn't look very good. And so first thing I'll ask him is, do you have an evaluation report for that? And so that's.
And again, I want to go back to my point that if we're using a new product, and especially if it's not been used in your area much before, we need, we've taken all the time to specify it. We've drawn it on the drawings and labeled it. We've sent it out in sealed drawings to the plans examiner. We want to make sure it's going to be approved before we send it into the building official.
Exactly. So you think about the time that has to go through that. If the product's rejected, just having to go back to the drawing board, and it could be a product that would affect several other products in that design. So Louis, excellent point on that.
So why should we? What are the bona fides for the ICC evaluation service?
See some slides. We part of the International Code Council, so we're basically in the same building as the people developing the code, so we're easily accessible to them, and so we're familiar with what's going on as far as code changes. And we also have them as a sounding block for something we might be looking at, whether it be something that's just in the code, or we want to compare the code. That gives us extra resources as far as not just evaluation people that we're talking to. We've got the code development people as well that's accessible. And we've part of ISO 17065. We're certified to that standard, and that's a pretty rigorous process. We go through audits every year, and just to determine that we're up to speed and that we're meeting the requirements of that standard. So not only, where we look at products, we're being looked at ourselves as far as making sure we're an independent agency, and we have to keep training and stay technically competent and everything. And also, we've been around beforehand. Some of you have been around a while, I guess, familiar with, we go back before the merger even. We had ICBO Evaluation Services, BOCA Evaluation Services, then SBCCI Product Safety Testing Services, and also the National Evaluation Services. So we go back even into those groups, and we have people that were part of those groups that are with us now, even after the merger. And but we also we have the governing bodies code officials as well. So we get continuous input from building officials on what they want to see and how they want to see it. And that's both from an administrative end and also from a technical end. We'll talk about acceptance criteria in a little bit as well, and I'll get into that a little more also.
Okay, we have a few more questions.
We might kind of summarize then that you, in effect, are kind of the link between building officials and design professionals, because you have to see the needs of both groups and try to make sure that what you approve meets the requirements of both.
Oh, exactly. I mean, really, we're kind of almost having to look three different directions, building officials and architects, as you mentioned. Also, we have to look at the needs of the manufacturers as far as, say, timeliness where we can, no short in the schedule where we can. A lot of times we get a bad reputation for taking a long time to approve something, but we have our best thoughts as well as trying to look out for the manufacturers and try to get something in a timely manner. So it's real, like I said, three different ways we have to look at that.
Okay, we have a few questions, Barry, that I'd like to put to you. We have another one from Tommy Smith, who's asking, does the evaluation service compete with other inspection services such as UL, Warnock, Hersey, or FM?
We do, and even more so, it seems like the last several years. For a while, it seemed like it was mostly, before the merger, it was basically SBCCI would compete with ICBO and BOCA. Then after the merger, it seemed like there was other agencies came in and started doing evaluation reports. We have testing agencies, as you mentioned, that they've started writing some evaluation reports, and then other code bodies such as IAPMO. They've started writing not only to the plumbing code, they've started writing building evaluation reports.
Okay. We have another question from Wayne Yancey, who's asking, how do we anticipate what products will be demanded by the AHJ to provide evaluation service reports? And he goes on to ask, should we just wait for the AHJ to make the demand, and at that point, what should we be looking to do? Bind them into the project manual or obtain a prior approval?
I think that's, Wayne, that's kind of the overall theme of this session, and I think much of that question is going to be answered as we go through the presentation. In short, I think, if the product is not directly covered in the code, as Barry did, then you may need to look for some information. And we're going to talk about when do you need to look for these evaluation reports and compare them between different manufacturers and what to look for. So I think we'll get to that in a little while.
Okay, then we should press on.
Well, here's what a report looks like, and Barry's going to talk a little bit later about actually the structure, but it looks a lot like the old spec data, doesn't it, guys and gals? It's organized in a very whether it's we're looking at paint or looking at eaves or looking at some kind of roofing system, the information is presented in the same way, in the same sequence, so that you can very quickly find exactly what you need to know about your particular product and with respect to the needs of your individual project. Back to you, Barry.
Yeah, and one thing you notice too, some easy ways. I'll point out our database later in the presentation, but up top you see how it's broken down with CSI number. I always find that it's a real easy way to look for particular products that in our database. But we'll go ahead and go to the next slide and get kind of into the meat of these reports. And we'll just break it down section by section and show you. For example, like I just mentioned the CSI division number. It makes it an easy way to locate the products in our database and just to see kind of in general what the product is based on. And also we'll have the report holder. Along with that, in our example we don't show this, but the report holder actually might decide, in this case, they might be approached by a sales company that wants to take their product and market it. Along with Acme, we might also have a private, what we call a private label listee. So along with Acme, we might have, say, AAA sales or something. They might want to brand it with their own product name, and it'll be the same exact product manufactured on the same line at the same time as Acme's product, but they might have that different branding as far as a different product name. So if there's a product out there like that, we'll have that on there as well. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, Barry, to add to that, I just saw that recently where the metal stud manufacturers associations, there are several now, and each one of them has multiple manufacturers listed on their evaluation report. So it's essentially their membership showing up on the Manufacturers Association's evaluation report. But what I wanted to ask you is, like Lewis had mentioned, spec data, the numbering scheme that you have for the evaluation reports, is that numbering always the same for every report? And do you have all of those headings included every time?
We do. Let's say, for example, the ESR-2000 or something like that. That'd be similar for the evaluation reports. It will change if we have a listing. Well, we have a fairly new listing program. If it's a listing, we'll have an ESL. And then we also have a plumbing, mechanical, and gas reports, which will have a PMG indexing. And as well, we have environmental reports. They'll have a different indexing as well. But for the most part, the vast majority of our reports are the ESRs.
Barry, on number 4, the evaluation scope, if this is issued for conformance of the product to the 2009 IBC, for example, is there a presumption then that if the local jurisdiction is still on the 2006, that it would be acceptable for the earlier versions of the IBC?
That'd be left up to the building official. Most cases I've run into, they will go ahead and accept that. And even for the most part, say if it's a 2012 code they've adopted, just take the opposite end of things. A lot of times they'll accept that as well if there hasn't been a big change in similar type products in the code. They'll go ahead and accept that.
Okay. Hurry through this a little bit. So.
Yeah. And then within that, you want to look at, pay close attention to the particular uses and of the product. This one doesn't get as detailed as some of them. Some of them will give particular uses and tell a lot of the limits within that section, whether it be limits to type 5 construction or various other things where there might be particular boundaries on where it can be used. And,
when we look at a couple of examples, Barry, I think we'll get into that in a little more detail. Let's go on to the next slide if we could.
Sure.
One of the things that I think is very critical is number 9.
Exactly. That's very
because
important.
that tells you when you can use it and when you can't use it by implication.
Right, and then it'll tell you what's needed along with that product as well. It might give you that, so it might tell you some other product that has to be used with it. So it's you're right. That's probably, if anything, is the most important, because a lot of times design and installation, a lot of times manufacturer's data is about the same thing as what we'll have, but with conditions of use, that's very important. That's a lot of times when a evaluation reports reference, sometimes that's ignored and it ends up causing trouble down the road.
I looked at the reports on 4 different EIFS manufacturers, and all of them state in the conditions of use paragraph that their product is not permitted in type 5 construction for occupancy groups R1, R2, R3, and R4. So that's a really critical thing, that you can use it for other occupancy groups and other construction types, but you can't use it for a stick-built hotel.
That's an excellent point as well, because that's almost a flip to what you think. Because a lot of times we think type 5, type 5 Group R buildings are less restrictive, but within the code in Chapter 26, a specific section will limit that unless other testing is performed. So that's an excellent point right there.
Now tell us a little bit about the listings and how do they differ from the evaluation reports?
Like I said earlier, the listing program is pretty new with what we've got, and we just started this up to address more basic products, products that are normally in the code and might have been around a long time, where they just might meet one standard. For example, the asphalt saturated organic felt for roof, where it just has to meet ASTM V226. It's just, you don't have to go into a lot of depth, but the main thing just to have a listing where it shows it meets that particular building standard.
So in the example here on the screen, this particular brand of CMU meets the strength requirements of the code.
Exactly, and material requirements as well. There's a within ASTM C90, there's a list of requirements that
yes.
CMUs have to meet, and this would show that they would meet those requirements. And also have the quality control as well. That's another important aspect. Along with looking at the technical and test data, we also look at the quality control requirements and have annual inspections. So they would have to show where they produce the product like they say they are in the quality manual. So that's a very important part of our process as well.
Okay.
And like Lewis shows here, just a little difference between the ESR and the listing program. I think you touched on some of it already, but whereas the ESR is more of a innovative product, the listing is usually for more of a traditional product, or maybe looking at one particular aspect of a product, such as something like surface
more
parts.
the basic materials, basic building materials.
Exactly. And yeah, I think we've touched on this pretty good, but just the value of having an ICC reporter listing is we've looked at both the technical aspects and the quality aspects for the building official, whereas time-wise and just having the number of employees able to go out and do all this stuff would make life a little easier for them.
Okay.
For,
tell us a little bit about acceptance criteria. Who sets the criteria for whether or not a given product is acceptable?
Okay, this is where it gets real different as far as something we do a little different than everybody else, and actually some of the different organizations didn't do this until the merger, but the acceptance criteria gives us the closest thing I could say is like to be almost like a standard, but it gives a listing of different tests that would be required. So, for example, on the ecosystems, we would have a particular acceptance criteria for that, or say foam plastic, or say deck boards, so different items like that. We have individual acceptance criteria, and they just finished one of the meetings this week. We meet 3 times a year, and it's almost like code hearings if you're familiar with how those meetings go. We'll have a manufacturer that proposes either a change to an existing acceptance criteria or proposing a new one because they have a new product. And within this, we'll present our findings and give a listing of tests that's required and how it should be tested and results that we'd be looking for on the test, and then the quality requirements that we have. So it's a huge, big undertaking.
Very impressive.
It really sets it. And what I mentioned earlier, remember I mentioned how the building officials are heavily involved with this. We have a committee made up of 9 building officials, and they're part of a panel during these discussions. And as manufacturers make their presentations, or say it might be a competing manufacturer that argues that they shouldn't be able to do it, or it might be an engineer or architect that's promoting the product, they'll listen to the arguments and decide whether or not to allow that acceptance criteria to go through and have evaluation reports written on that. So it's a very, very in-depth process. And what I could do, I know we're going to talk about a lot about the ecosystems. I can send Lewis a copy of the acceptance criteria on that. You know, a lot of times, I think here recently they've been selling, but since we're talking about the ecosystem, I'm going to send Lewis a copy. If y'all want to post it somewhere just to have an example.
Yes, we can do that. Thank you very much, Barry.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that.
Okay.
Say, Barry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Louis. I was just going to ask if, for the acceptance criteria, is that simply the trying to establish the code requirements that the products or systems must meet? Because, or are you going beyond what we may find in the code to set the acceptance criteria?
Actually, beyond, because what happens, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these products, like masonry and wood and other products, are tested over time, and they have a lot of history behind them. There's comfort zone as far as, say, durability and other aspects of their products. So we might get a new product in, for example, the deck boards, the wood plastic composite deck boards. It's been recently made into a standard and put in the code, but up until the 2009 code is basically operated off of as an acceptance criteria when a manufacturer wanted to get that product approved. So we would have to go in, since different makeups of the product. Some manufacturers might use more plastic or a different type of plastic, or more wood, or might just be all PVC or something like that. We'd have to go in and look at durability requirements such as freeze-thaw, moisture, UV requirements. So it's really gets a little deeper than what you see in the code in a lot of cases because of that, because of it being an innovative and new product.
Okay, thank you. I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. That's a good question.
And I think we need to go through these last few slides pretty quickly, Barry, so we can talk about some specifics. I mean,
sure.
Obviously we have to have any inspection agencies and test laboratories have to be suitably accredited, and the standards are set for them.
Right.
And,
we'll look at
there's some more about the acceptance criteria.
Right, and I think we got that pretty well covered. We've discussed a lot of these issues here, so we'll move on with that.
I think that the last bullet there is especially telling, is that because the whole point is when the codes are not fully clear about whether or not a given product meets the intent of the code, and or when there's industry concern, or when new criteria are deemed necessary. So all of that is what you talked about and explained that very well.
And one thing I want to point out, if you're interested in how, I would encourage you at least once, probably all you could take, but maybe sit in on maybe 30 minutes of one of these hearings, and we have them televised over the web, so you can watch it, and say our next one will be in October. So what you might want to do is go to our website, and you can look at some particular proposals that are coming out, see if any are of particular interest to you, or a product that might be coming along that you're interested in. I'd strongly encourage you maybe to follow that one particular product and watch, and just maybe, like I said, maybe a half hour of the hearings, and just get a feel for how it's all put together. Like I said,
I'm sure that'd be fascinating.
Say, Barry, one other question here from Tommy Smith, asking, are design professionals included on the review committees? And I think he was asking after you were talking about the acceptance criteria.
Right. It's made up. There's several. It's made up of building officials, and several of the building officials are Ps and registered architects as well. But it's solely made up of people from building departments to kind of keep that independence and connection there.
All right. Well, let's talk about so when we're evaluating products and we think that we might need to look at the evaluation service report, one of the first things to do is look for use limitations, and we talked about construction type. Are there limitations on what kinds of construction the product can be used in? And are there limitations on the occupancy groups, as we saw with the EIFS, that you can't use it on type 5 with those R1 through R4 occupancy? So that's one of the first things to consider and look for. This actually came up for me in real life. My firm was hired to do an expert testimony and report, and looking at some drawings for a 3-story hotel that was built several years ago in one of the suburbs of Nashville. I found out whose brand of EIFS was on the project, looked up the evaluation report, and lo and behold, it says you're not allowed to use it on the building. So wasn't enforced, obviously, by the building official, but it was nevertheless, that's an issue. A second one
could be embarrassing to the design team. That's
could be very embarrassing. Well, actually,
and expensive.
It was kind of dictated by the franchise company. I won't say the name of the hotel chain, but you'd recognize it. Another thing then we may want to look for in the evaluation reports is the technical limitations, and of course the chief one being are there issues related to fire resistant construction? If it's foam plastic, how is that dealt with? And of course now we all know about the NFPA 285 testing, and we all know that foam plastic is supposed to be separated from the occupied areas by a thermal barrier, but I've been in old buildings where that was not the case. Another one is, this one relates more to EIFS than anything else. I've looked at lots of EIFS evaluation reports over the years, and none of them allow use of the product on overhead horizontal surfaces. So if you're doing a canopy, you need to go to DEFS or some other product. You're really not supposed to use EIFS in that manner. Another one to look at is wind loaded criteria, and I'm going to go over to, let me close this for a moment. Hang with me, gang. We think we know what we're doing.
We know you were prepared, Lewis.
Here we go. Here's a comparison chart between 4 major manufacturers of EIFS. And you see that depending upon the stud size, there are different features available. And one of the manufacturers only goes to -25 and +35. Well, that means that you may not be able to use that brand of EIFS on a building that's 4, 5, 6 stories high or taller. And it does also, so that's one of the things you want to look for is technical limitations. Can I even use it on my project? And wind load criteria is one of those.
And Lewis, point out to you, on the wind loads, a common mistake would be, as you're showing on the table, particular fasteners and things like that. It might be they use the product, but they don't use the fastener that's prescribed within the report.
Exactly, and we're going to get to that very point in just a minute, Barry. So there are other kinds of performance needs that we need to look at. But one of the things that's kind of critical is to look for the effects on other products. And again, we're going to go back to our EIFS example. Let me get to my comparison chart. Sorry about that, gang. Here we are. So, in order to, let's pick this. We're going to do a wall with 6-inch studs, and we need a wind load of negative at least 45. Well, one manufacturer says that the sheathing fasteners, which are not going to be specified with the EIFS, they're going to be specified with the gypsum sheathing, have to be a maximum 8 inches on center. But the next guy, for approximately the same level of coverage, not only do the fasteners have to be 6 inches on center, but they also want the sheathing covered with metal mesh. and this manufacturer can actually meet the wind load criteria with a 3 5/8 inch stud, and this manufacturer can't meet it at all. So my point is that in addition to seeing whether you can use the product with the wind pressures, the different manufacturers may require different spacing for the fasteners in the gypsum sheathing that's in a whole other spec section. You want to talk about that?
The point here is that you really have to read the evaluation reports carefully, because they've got a lot of information in them and things well beyond just the immediate material.
And of course, how do the terminations work? Does it need to be protected from the weather, or is it itself a weather protective material? Does it need to be vulnerable to exposure to sunlight, or to water, or to other conditions, and needs to be concealed and protected? And how is it supported and anchored? Again, talking about things like the steel studs that are outside the scope of the product itself and would affect other specification sections. And how are the transitions between this product and adjacent products handled, so to provide the full weather protection or the full fire resistance protection, or whatever the quality is. So we kind of rushed through that last little bit, but I wanted to try to give us some time for some more questions. I think before we take the questions, let me go to the actual website for...
Hey, Louis, we had one question, and
Sure.
maybe you could put it up on the screen, as they were just asking if you could make the comparison table a little bit larger so it's more legible.
Oh, okay.
And, the one question that I have, and Barry, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, but some of the concern I see, especially when I look at master spec, there oftentimes a submittal requirement for the contractor to make this a submittal including evaluation reports. And it's really my opinion that that's something that the design team should be looking at to be able to select the products, and should not really be after the fact and a contractor responsibility. So, Louis, I'd really like to hear your opinion on it, and Barry, if you have an opinion on that too.
Sure.
Because the conditions for the use of the product in terms of its effect on other products is necessary, I think it's a good idea to have, for certain products, to have evaluation reports submitted as informational supports to informational submittals, to have that information available so that everybody can see, oops, we need to have more screws in the gypsum sheathing, or we need to go to a thicker gauge on the steel studs.
Yeah, I agree. Very good point, Kyle. There's so much within the design that depends on the requirements of each individual product. I think it definitely needs to be looked at ahead of time, and not just basically put off for the contractor.
Well, if we learn nothing else today, I want everybody to memorize the URL for ICC Evaluation Service. It's simply icc-es.org, and here's their home page. And if we click on the evaluation reports, can.
And if the internet cooperates.
Yeah, well, I've just got a lot of programs open, and so the computer's, I'm stretching it to its limits. So there are different ways to search, and we can go in here and we can look under, well, let's look under thermal and moisture protection. And so here's a whole list of master format numbers if we want to talk about water resistive barriers / weather barriers. Those are probably building wraps as opposed to air barriers. And here's the metal shingles, and there's the clay roof tiles that Barry showed us a picture of. Composite wall panels, and it brings it right up. So here's the manufacturers that are available: Trespa and Citadel and several others, and a couple I've never heard of, Fundermax. That sounds interesting. We'll have to look at that. And then you click on this, and over here it tells you which codes it's been evaluated for, the 2009, the 2006. And so we clicked on one to open it. And we're going to get a PDF here in just a second. I should have closed a couple other programs to make this work faster. I apologize.
So, Barry,
but it's just...
I was going to ask Louis, if you're... What level of participation do you think you have from the manufacturers, from normally specified building products? Is it a really good representation? Is it something that is still growing? Should we be able to expect to find evaluation reports from most of the major manufacturers?
It's very well represented. There's several, I'd say the major manufacturers, you could look for, you can pretty well count on them having evaluation report. Say, for example, the fastening systems, Ed Simpson and Powers and several others. We, in total, I'm not sure about the number of companies, but in total, the number of evaluation reports is well over 3,000 now. So it was very well represented with manufacturers.
Okay.
All right. Well, I see that we're at the end of the hour. Do we have any one last question from the audience, or?
Well, we do have a couple, and maybe we can deal with these last couple. There's one from Mary Noe, who's asking, do manufacturers' literature typically include requirements in accordance with the evaluation reports?
They do sometimes, but it's always good to go and look at the evaluation report as well. And I've noticed a lot of manufacturers, if you get on their website within their requirements, they'll go ahead and provide a direct link to the evaluation report as well.
Well, the kind of the point is, in many respects, yes, the technical information will be in the manufacturer's product data, but there's two things. One is they're going to organize the sequence of that information, idiosyncratically, and two, the primary thing is that it's not been evaluated by an independent group such as ICC ES, and so you'd have to submit that product data to the local building official, who would then have to think about whether or not it's acceptable, whereas if you've got an evaluation report for that same manufactured product, maybe the same information, but our local building inspector knows that Barry and his cohorts have gone to a great deal of effort to determine that this thing really does meet the code requirements, and he's much more likely to accept that, and it'll be a much faster process to do so.
Okay. I have one last thing from Rosa Cheney. and this was just a comment about using the evaluation reports as a submittal. So Rosa's saying she thinks it's important for the design team to be looking at the evaluation report in advance as part of the product selection, but also important as a submittal to be sure the contractor installs per the report's requirements, almost like they should be using it as a manufacturer's written instruction.
Yes, and that's right. That gets back to what's this fastener spacing and what's the minimum gauge for the studs that hold up the substrate for eaves in the example that we looked at today. But there are dozens of examples that people could think of. It's just that's one that I have had to investigate in the past when I worked for my previous firm. We did a lot of hotels that used eaves, and sometimes there were major manufacturers that got excluded from my specifications because their evaluation reports did not meet the circumstances for which the building was going to be built. Couldn't meet the thing. So
okay. Well,
one thing to keep in mind too is the way it's shown in the report was the way it was tested and approved. So that's a very good question, because it's very important that whether it's that particular assembly or the particular fasteners used or however, that's extremely important, because that's the way we looked at the data on that particular product.
that's right. We can make those available then to the actual building inspector on site that the contractor may need to do that. Well, we need to wrap up, and David and I were talking about what to do next month. We're not really sure. Next month, the first Thursday falls on the 3rd, and we think it would be imprudent to try to meet on that date, so we will roll it back 1 week and meet on the 10th of July, the second Thursday, and we will send out a notification pretty soon, as soon as we figure out what David's going to talk about next month.
Thanks, Louis. I appreciate that. Well, and I want to thank Barry Johnson for joining us today. Thank you very much, Barry. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank y'all too. I really enjoyed the time. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And
it was really very informative.
I want to invite all of those that are still hanging on here. Now, here's the pitch. August is your chance to tell us what you want or what you are doing, things that interest you. We're going to ask Matt to send out a notice to everyone. We're going to play Pekakucha in August. So we're going to try to select some of our practice group members to present something of their own, a topic of your own interest. I think it'll be a good way to try to mix this up a bit and give you, all of you that would like the opportunity, a chance to share your voice with the rest of the group. So,
because we know some of you guys and gals out there are writing very good blogs, and you have done some investigation, and you know some things that we don't know, and we want to share that.
Right. So look for the announcement for Matt. Send in your idea. We do not need a fully developed 10-page paper. All we need is a topic and a hint at what it will be. So with that, I guess we'll sign off. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you July 10th.